Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I've got an interesting idea for you. I wanted to extend the Emperor's Children range, because if you didn't know, they aren't a new faction in the 40k universe, but their actual army in-game is relatively new, and so their options for units are a bit limited at the moment. So, I've taken it upon myself to make my own Emperor's Children units and characters and stuff, because I'm just such an upstanding guy. Well, when it comes to the Emperor's Children, I don't think anything can be considered upstanding, because they're a freaky bunch. Just talking about them makes me feel dirty. But what makes me feel dirtier is when you subscribe. Yeah, I went there. Basically, in this video, I'm going to give you some examples of some stuff that I would like to see in the Emperor's Children range. I'll provide some examples of them existing in lore, and I'll give you a quick mock-up data sheet, just with some examples, stats and rules. I've been quite looking forward to this video, so let's get straight into it. The Emperor's Children are one of 4 Chaos Space Marine legions that worship just one Chaos God. Obviously, they worship Slaanesh, which on its own is problematic, but a couple of the other Chaos Space Marine armies have their own Terminator variants. Well, the World Eaters don't, because I suppose they like to move fast, and they're just completely crazy. But the Thousand Sons have the Scarab Occult Terminators, the Death Guard have Blight Lord and Death Shroud Terminators, and even the basic Chaos Terminators can be used for the Emperor's Children, World Eaters, and basically every other Chaos Space Marine army. My point is that I think the Emperor's Children should have their own Terminator unit. Sure, they like to be fast, like the World Eaters, and their Flawless Blades have a similar sort of vibe than the World Eaters 8-bound units, but during the Horus Heresy, they did have an exclusive Terminator unit called the Phoenix Terminators. I don't know if they're still around at all, but it would be easy to write in that some survived the Heresy and continue to operate as an Emperor's Children elite unit. Plus, the Horus Heresy ones just look really good, so you can only imagine how good a 40k variant would look. As for their stats, I'd give them the normal Terminator bulk, but like Terminators if you ran them with World Eaters, I'd give them a 7-inch move instead of the normal 5. I would have them keep their Phoenix Power Spears, which I'd make similar to the Lord Exaltant's Phoenix Power Spear, so like 3 attacks, strength 6, AP-2, 2 damage, but also with lance. I think lower attacks but higher strength, AP and damage makes sense for a spear. I don't know if I'd actually give them a ranged weapon or not, because the 30k ones don't have them. But most Terminator ranged weapons tend to be more about bonus damage than anything, so maybe instead I should up the strength of the spears to 7 or like 4 attacks instead, just to make up for it. Or I could just give them a shield. That would give them 4 wounds each or something. Finally, for their special rules, like all Terminators, they can deep strike, and for their own special rule, maybe like they can return to reserves after they kill a character when the combat finishes or something. I don't know, there's quite a few different things you can do. I would also keep the points cost around the 180 mark, like most units of 5 Terminators, maybe a little more expensive because melee Terminators tend to be, and also that return to reserves might be a bit too good, but I don't know how they would play. It'd be interesting to find out. Another exclusive Emperor's Children unit from the Horus Heresy range are the Palatine Blades, who are some more Emperor's Children elites that have unmatched martial prowess. Again, I do not know for sure if they do still exist, but I think they do. They might just be Flawless Blades now, but for the sake of an interesting video, let's assume some version of them still exists to some capacity. Although annoyingly, just in essence of being a melee Emperor's Children unit, they would probably end up being kind of similar to Flawless Blades. I don't really know how to do their stats. Probably a 7-inch move seems fair, but should I give them a 2+ save like they have in 30k, or should I give them the regular 3+ with an invulnerable save? Yeah, I'll probably do that. I'll give them 3 wounds each like Chaos Chosen, and for their weapons, they can have their bolt pistols, and they can also keep their charnable weapons, so they have sabres, tabars, and glaives, each with slightly differing stats. As for their abilities, I think they should have access to the Slaanesh Icon of Excess, and I was playing around with giving them fights first, but this would definitely make them too overpowered. For their ability, I'd go for something like the Blade Guard veterans get, call it like stance change. I give them an attack stance that make them reroll ones to hit, and a defensive stance, which like takes 1 off the roll to wound for melee weapons. That would probably make them just a bit better than Blade Guard, plus you get 5, so they'd actually be decently hard to kill, but it's fun. I'd have a squad of 5, mostly just to differentiate them from Flawless Blades, and they seem quite good, so maybe like 100 points for the squad. I wanted to do a couple of characters, and to my surprise, Lord Eidolon, the Emperor's Children Lord Commander during the Heresy, is still alive. I thought he got beheaded or something, but I guess that wasn't enough for him. I think a model for him would actually be really cool, because he is still around, and one of the bigger Emperor's Children characters who are left. For his stats, I think 6 wounds with a 2+ save, 4+ invulnerable, and he can have a 12-inch move, because in the Horus Heresy, he has access to a Warhawk jump pack, and this means he can also have deep strike. For his weapons, he can keep his Horus Heresy, I don't know how to say that word, Archaeotech pistol, because why not? And then as another ranged weapon, well, so to speak, I've given him Death Scream, which is a 12-inch range, D6 plus 2 attacks, torrent and ignores cover, but only 4 strength and AP 0, for a little extra bonus damage. and I haven't made it a psychic weapon because it comes more from his augmentations rather than being a psyker. He can also have his Gloria Turner hammer, which has some nice stats as well as devastating wounds and precision, which seems good. But I wanted his role to sort of be to lead a jump unit over to the enemy and just assassinate their warlord. For his abilities, he has Prideful Onslaught. Yes, I'm stealing these names from 30k, and this allows you to reroll the wound roll when attacking your opponent's warlord. And also Sonic Shriekers, which will do D3 mortal wounds to the opponent's unit if you're still in combat at the end of the turn. Because of his jump pack, it's difficult to give him any of the current units to lead, but I would let him lead a new unit I'm also going to make. I would make him cost 130 points, which is quite expensive, but with his stats and abilities, if he does get into combat with your warlord, then your warlord is probably dead, or at least close to it. So I think he should cost a premium for just being seemingly very good for this role. I think Eidolon should be a character in 40k, but with this spread, he's probably a bit OP. But you'll see that a lot throughout this video. Right, GW can provide the balancing, I've got the ideas. Speaking of which, I do expect some royalties, even though they're not my characters to begin with, or just like hire me instead. I don't think the Emperor's Children have their own named unit of jump pack troops, nor do I think they're particularly related with jump troops, but I have let Eidolon keep his jump pack, so he needs a unit of jump troops to lead, and also I just think they could have picked it up in the last 10,000 years. Their fighting style is getting in quick with melee and using their martial prowess to win, and jump packs do let you get into quick melee, so I think it at least makes sense. I would call them the Aquilla Blades. I couldn't think of a good name, but the Emperor's Children still have the Aquilla sigil, so maybe they would have a 12-inch move and basic marine stats, but I'd let them have a 5+ invulnerable and deep strike. For their weapons, they can have some bolt pistols and maybe some plasma for their obsessionist leader. For their melee weapons, I think I'd just be a bit boring and let them have the same as the Infractors, with the dueling sabers. But I also think another option would be to replace their pistol and have a second dueling saber, because that sounds scary. For their ability, I'd call it Blissful Rampage, which for every enemy unit you destroy, your unit of Aquilla Blades can add 1 to its next charge move, until your unit's either destroyed or you fail a battle shock test. I think this is pretty good, and if you end up cutting down multiple smaller units of light stuff, then later on in the game, you'd be able to get some pretty nasty long charges. Of course, they can be led by Eidolon, which would actually transfer their ability to him, which is pretty scary, and they would cost 110 points for 5 or 200 points for 10. Because I have those Phoenix Terminators, I wanted a character model in Terminator armor to be able to lead them, and because all other Chaos Space Marine armies have sort of Terminator characters. I probably could have dug out another named character from the kind of limited archives of still alive Emperor's Children characters, but I feel like the likelihood of finding one alive who still uses and leads Phoenix Terminators is probably a shot in the dark. However, it doesn't have to be a named character. I propose a Lord Triumphant, which, yes, it's kind of like a Lord Exultant, but for Terminators, but I thought it'd be a nice leader option for them. I also know the Lord Cacophonist can lead Terminators, but he's more of a noise-based guy, and I feel like the only reason he can lead Terminators to start with is because A, they needed someone to lead them in this army, and B, he's got some big chunky armour on. So the stats kind of line up, but that's about it. The stats of my Lord Triumphant would be like regular Terminators, just with 6 wounds instead, unless I did give those Phoenix Terminators shields, then he can have 7, but that is really quite tanky. I'd give him access to a slightly better Phoenix Power Spear, like the Lord Exultant, and then I'd let him have the Raptor Lash too, because I'm basic. And I think it looks good, and while I'm at it, he can have the same pistols and sword as the Lord Exultant too, just so he can at least have some other options. Although you never really see Terminators with pistols, whatever. Instead of giving lethal hits though, like the Lord Exultant, I propose Superior Thrusts, which is a name with a double meaning. I wanted something that would pair well with the lance keyword that all the spears get, so like an extra strong first combat turn. So like if you charged, it would make your lance weapons reroll the wound roll instead of adding 1, and it would also +1 to the weapon's strength too. For his other ability, Unrestrained Assault, which I suppose could also have a double meaning. Moving on, basically like a Terminator captain, he can reroll a failed charge for his unit. This guy would cost 95 points, and he can only lead the Phoenix Terminators, because if they were added, I would assume they'd replace the regular Chaos Terminators, but if they are still there, then he can lead them too. For whatever reason, the Emperor's Children don't have access to some of the normal Chaos stuff, like you would expect, like Vindicators and the 2 Predators, which is especially surprising because all of the Emperor's Children are probably Predators. So, I wanted to just quickly give them these datasheets. They'll be very similar to the normal stats, just with different abilities, like how they are for each of the Chaos Legions. I'll start with the Predator Annihilator, which has the twin las cannons, and usually its abilities tend to have something to do with shooting at enemy monsters and vehicles. Call it Plentiful Annihilation, and it will give you sustained hits 1 against monsters and vehicles, and I'll make it 140 points. The Destructive variant has the Predator autocannon, and its special rule usually happens when targeting non-monsters and vehicles, so basically the opposite. Would it be too strong to give it precision? Probably. So how about like a marking effect instead? So you add one to the charge of your unit against an enemy infantry unit that you shot at with your Predator autocannon. As for the Vindicator, only the Thousand Suns and regular Chaos have access to it, and it doesn't really feel too Emperor's Children-y, but if it was in the Emperor's Children range, it would probably have access to the Siege Shield anyway, like all the others do. A lot of the units that I've done have had a big focus on melee, so why not do the opposite? Sure, the Emperor's Children do love their glorious melee, but they still have some shooter units, like their tanks and of course Noise Marines. I wanted to make an indirect fire artillery vehicle, sort of like a whirlwind. I wanted to make it like a noise-based weapon, like a bigger version of the Noise Marines weapons. Well, I don't know how this works, but they seem to fire a focused beam of noise, or something, so I don't know how that would transfer over to an indirect fire unit. Luckily, the Emperor's Children also love drugs, so I went with that instead. Meet the Euphoria Launcher. Built on the chassis of the old Scorpius missile tank from 30k, this bad boy can fire indirectly at enemies, providing something that would probably be the opposite of Euphoria, but it can also fire at your own team, which I will get into. For its stats, it's kinda similar to the Space Marine Whirlwind and Death Guard Plague Burst Crawler, so like toughness 10, a 3+ save and 11 wounds. But I did give it a 12-inch move instead of the normal 10, because yes, Emperor's Children like to be fast, but also the old Scorpius has also got a 12-inch move. For its weapons, I've given it a combi bolter and then some basic tracks for melee, but then you've got its Euphoria Chem Launcher. Its demise rounds have a 48-inch range, blast, indirect fire, D6+6 attacks, strength 7, AP-1 and damage 1, which is fine for an indirect fire weapon, and great for unarmored infantry. And if you look at the war gear section, you can see how these rounds basically do the same thing as a Basilisk, which slows you down. But this is where it gets interesting. I don't think this has ever been done before, and I've given it something called Ecstasy rounds, which instead of shooting the demise rounds at the enemy, instead you pick a friendly unit and fire at them instead. Explanation time. Essentially, you're only firing a couple of non-explosive rounds, which obviously don't explode, but they release a gas instead, which would be inhaled by the unit that you shot at. Again, you can find this in the war gear section, and so this gas would make the unit go into a blissful trance, which is not very blissful, and it's basically just a frenzy. It would add 3 inches to that unit's charge move and cock size for that turn, and it would also give you +1 attack, strength, and an extra -1 AP for each model as long as you're in melee. But if you do end up failing the charge, you lose D3 models, because they like overdose or some shit. God, this definitely is not balanced. Finally, its ability would just be the fact that you get multiple rounds to choose from, and that you can only fire the ecstasy rounds twice per game, because essentially you've already got 2 abilities. I would make it cost 220 points for the vehicle, which is a touch more expensive than most other indirect fire units, because you've got multiple things you can do with it. Going back to the Emperor's Children fast attack theme that I've been playing around with, why not include some bikes? Regular Chaos Space Marines have them, and they're known for their use in the Red Corsairs, but how about I take it up a notch? Jet bikes. Of all the remaining Chaos Legions, it would make the most sense for the Emperor's Children. They're fast, and get you into combat, like I've discussed, but they also just look really good, which is something they definitely used to be all about. Not so sure now though, because those flawless blades are hella ugly, and don't even get me started on Lucius. I really like how the 30k Sky Hunters look, so I'll use them as my base, and just throw some melee troops on top of them. I'm aware that Sky Hunters probably aren't still around, but a very brief Google search told me some legions may still have some, so I'm sticking with that. They would need a cool Emperor's Children sounding name, so how about Dispatchers? The idea being simple, they're just a speedy mounted melee unit. For their stats, I think a 12-inch move is pretty standard for bike units, then toughness 5, 4 wounds and OC 2. For their ranged weapons, because I've used the Sky Hunter chassis for this unit, which actually have quite a few nice different ranged options, and I've decided to let this unit keep most of these options, but GW could also give them just something else entirely. For their combat weapons, it's mainly between sabers and spears with a couple of extra options for their Obsessionist. For their ability, I've been lazy and it's very similar to the Outrider and normal Chaos Biker ability. I'd call it Jubilant Impact, and it'd give you +1 strength and AP if you charged, which would pair well with Lance on those spears, making for yet another unit with an extra strong first charge, but I think it just works in this army. I've made these guys 90 points for 3 or 180 points for 6, which I think is a fair amount. That wraps up all of the units that I've made for the Emperor's Children, just to help out with their limited roster. To summarise, I made some Phoenix Terminators, because they might still be around in the lore, and they would make for a good powerful alternative to Flawless Blades, if not a bit too similar. Then Palatine Blades, just for an elite troop option that aren't as bulky as Terminators or Flawless Blades, but again, they might be a bit too similar. Lord Commander Eidolon is still around in the lore, so I thought he deserved a model, because Lucius the Eternal and Fulgrim are the only current named Emperor's Children characters, and Eidolon was a decently big character. Plus with his jump pack, he can play the role of the enemy Warlord Assassin. I also gave him a unit to lead in the Aquilla Blades, which are basically just Palatine Blades with jump packs, who Eidolon can lead. Then I made a Terminator champion sort of character in the Lord Triumphant, kind of like the Lord Exultant for those Phoenix Terminators. Then I made some basic stats for Predators and Vindicators, because for some reason they aren't already a part of the Emperor's Children range. Then I wanted an indirect fire artillery unit, so I made the Euphoria Launcher, which could also help your infantry too. And then finally, for a mounted unit, I got the Dispatchers, for some fast attack melee output, which the Emperor's Children don't really have currently. I'm pretty happy with the units that I came up with. There is quite a bit of overlap, because most of what I made is just melee elites, but it does fit the theme, and also this stuff just doesn't exist, and even if these units were made into actual models, what is the likelihood that they would use everything that I said? So the overlap really shouldn't be too much of an issue. Also yeah, the elephant in the room, a lot of the stuff I made is quite unbalanced. But my datasheets are just placeholders, more to give you some ideas. Like I said, Warhammer can do the balancing, I can build the hype with interesting and powerful unit ideas, but I am still happy with the ideas that I did come up with. Hopefully, the Emperor's Children do get a bit of an update to their range in the not so distant future. I hope to make more videos similar to this one with other armies, and that is where I will leave you. Let me know if you like any of the ideas that I played around with, and also let me know what other armies you would like to see have a more extended range. But anyway, I hope to catch you in the next one, and peace out.